Morning light streamed through the cafe's large windows, reflecting off an interior carefully decorated with green plants and light wood accents. Su Jin, a 35-year-old woman, sat at a corner table, nervously fidgeting with her napkin. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air, and the cheerful conversations around her seemed miles away from her reality. Today was special. She and her fiancé, Hyun-woo, were about to go over the final details of their upcoming wedding, but her mind was anywhere but here. "Are you still thinking about that presentation next week?" Hyun-woo asked, raising an eyebrow. He was a charming, kind man who always knew how to make Soo-jin smile, but today her smile felt forced. "No, it's just, Soo-jin hesitated, holding her phone as it buzzed repeatedly in her purse. She glanced at the screen and saw her mother's name, Mi-suk. Her heart started to race. "I think I need to take this." "Of course, go ahead," Hyun-woo said as Soo-jin stood up, her mind already bracing for possible turbulence. She stepped away and answered the call. "Hi, Mom." Her voice carried a mix of apprehension and affection. "Soo-jin, I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Mi-suk's voice was tense on the other end. Anxiety tightened Soo-jin's chest. What could be so important? "Mom, what happened?" "I don't know how to say this." Mi-suk hesitated. The silence that followed seemed to drag on, heavy with an unbearable weight. "You need to know the truth about your father." "My father? But you always said he left because of financial problems." Soo-jin interrupted, confused. "There's more to it. He abandoned me before you were born. It wasn't just about money. There were other reasons, and you need to know." Mi-suk's voice trembled, but there was a resolve in her tone that Soo-jin had never noticed before. Soo-jin's world shattered in an instant. Memories from her childhood flooded her mind. The silence at home, the questions left unasked, the stories never told. She stepped back, trying to process the revelation. "Mom, why didn't you ever tell me this before?" "I thought it was better this way. I wanted to protect you," Mi-suk answered, but her defensiveness didn't convince Soo-jin. "Protect me? From what, Mom? This is my life." Frustration and pain mingled in Soo-jin's voice. The trust she had in her mother felt cracked. "I didn't mean any harm, Soo-jin. I just wanted you to have a normal life." The word normal echoed in her mind, and a sense of betrayal washed over her. "You have no idea what it's like to be normal when you have an emptiness like this." "I need some time," she said, ending the call before her mother could respond. Returning to the table, she found Hyun-woo watching her with concern. "What happened? You look pale." "I don't know if I can go through with this, Hyun-woo." Her voice quivered, and her eyes couldn't seem to meet his. "What do you mean?" Hyun-woo frowned, his worry deepening. "We need to talk," Soo-jin said, already aware that she could no longer ignore the storm brewing inside her. "Now?" he asked, clearly hesitant. "Yes, now." As she spoke, a sense of urgency and desperation surged within her. Life, which once seemed so promising and clear, was now a tangled mess of uncertainties and painful revelations. With a heavy heart, she knew she had to face not just her mother, but the ghosts of the past that haunted her present. What did it mean to be the daughter of a man who chose absence? This was a moment that would change her life forever. Soo-jin looked out the window, watching people hurry by, each with their own stories, while she prepared for hers. The journey to understanding who she really was had just begun, and she was about to dive into a world that could change everything. The cafe now seemed darker, the sounds around her a distant echo. Soo-jin sat back down at the table, her mind a storm of emotions and questions. Hyun-woo's eyes were full of concern. "What do you mean by, 'I don't know if I can go through with this'?" Hyun-woo asked, his voice steady but gentle, trying to reach her amidst the emotional chaos. She took a deep breath, searching for the right words. I got a call from my mom, and she told me things I never knew about my dad. He left us before I was even born. It wasn't just about money like I always thought. There was more." The silence that followed was heavy, as if the truth she had just shared filled all the space between them. Hyun-woo leaned forward, the shock on his face softening into empathy. "That's a lot. You're dealing with so much right now." "It's not just that," Sujin forced herself to continue. I always thought his absence was my mom's fault, that she didn't do enough to keep him around, and now, knowing she hid the truth from me, this makes me question everything I thought I knew. Hyunwoo reached out, holding her fingers gently. You need time to process this. You don't have to decide anything right now. But that's what scares me. What does this mean for our future? I've always dreamed of a happy marriage, a family, and now I feel like I'm doomed to repeat the past. What do I do if I don't know what it means to have a father? How can I be a good mother someday? Frustration and fear laced her words, each one weighted with doubt. He looked into her eyes, determined. You're not your father. You're a strong woman, Sujin. This doesn't define who you are or what your family will be. You can create something new, something better. Sujin wanted to believe him, but the shadow of the past felt relentless. She recalled how her mother used to speak of her father with bitterness and sadness, and how hard she had tried to fill the void he left behind. What if I can't? What if I end up hurting my future child the way I was hurt? You won't. You have love, and that makes all the difference, Hyunwoo said, his voice steady, trying to anchor her in the storm of her emotions. Sujin's smile was faint, but insecurity still clung to her. What if I can't? What if I repeat the story? Hyunwoo took a deep breath, knowing this conversation wouldn't be easy. There's no guarantee that history won't repeat itself, but you can learn from it. You can choose to be different. No one is fated to follow the same path. Don't underestimate yourself. He watched her, hoping his words would sink into her tangled thoughts. The cafe buzzed around them, but in that moment, time seemed to stand still. After a few moments, Sujin changed the subject, a natural defensive move. What about the wedding? How does this affect our plans? We'll face it together, Hyunwoo said, his gaze so serious it gave Sujin a small sense of relief. We'll give ourselves time. We're not in a rush. A timid smile broke across Sujin's face, like a beam of light piercing the darkness. You're right. I just need to calm down and process all of this. And so, with a renewed sense of hope, they began talking about the wedding again, their ideas floating between them, starting to fill the void the previous revelation had left behind. As they talked, Sujin realized that even amidst the chaos, there was light. But as they spoke, she couldn't shake the feeling that the truth about her past was still lurking, ready to reveal itself in ways she could never imagine. She knew that the journey to uncover the full truth wasn't over, and that each step she took would likely lead to unexpected confrontations with her mother and the man who had left them. As their conversation flowed and plans took shape, Sujin prepared herself for a day that would be far more than just a wedding celebration. It was a step toward discovering who she truly was and what it meant to be part of a family. The day of Sujin and Hyunwoo's wedding was fast approaching, and the anticipation in the air was palpable. Yet Sujin still grappled with conflicting feelings about her family's past. Despite Hyunwoo's support, a shadow lingered over her heart, clouding the joy that should have come with preparing for their big day. Amid all the excitement, the truth about her father loomed like an open wound, ready to be torn apart at any moment. On a sunny Sunday morning, Sujin decided she needed to confront her mother, Mi-suk. The conversation she had avoided for so long had to happen. With her heart pounding, she made her way to her mother's apartment, each step echoing with a mix of anxiety and resolve. When she arrived, Mi-suk was busy in the kitchen preparing a snack. The kitchen smelled of homemade dishes that always brought warmth, but today it wasn't enough to calm Sujin's unease. "Hi, Mom," Sujin said, trying to form a smile. "Hi, sweetheart. How are you?" Mi-suk replied, her expression warm, but concern quickly washed over her face as she noticed her daughter's serious demeanor. "Is everything okay?" Sujin took a deep breath. "Actually, no. We need to talk about Dad." Mi-suk hesitated, as if the words were stuck in her throat. "I'm not sure if now is the right time." "Mom, I need to understand," Sujin insisted, her determination growing. "I need to know why he left us. What really happened?" Finally, Mi-suk sat down at the table, her eyes reflecting an old pain. "I never wanted you to find out. Not like this." Then tell me, please, Su-jin said, sitting across from her. I can't move on without knowing. Mi-suk closed her eyes for a moment, as if she were reliving days she wished she could forget. Your father. He wasn't an easy man. When we got married, he was full of dreams and hopes. But over time, everything changed. The work, the pressure. He started to drift away, losing himself, and I didn't know how to help him. But what about when you got pregnant with me? What happened? Su-jin pressed, her voice tangled with curiosity and pain. I was so happy about the news, but he wasn't. He became so overwhelmed, so desperate, that he started drinking. One night he just walked out and never came back, Mi-suk answered, tears starting to slip down her cheeks. I waited and waited and waited, but he never returned. That's when I decided to move, to try and rebuild our lives. The revelation felt like a punch to Su-jin's gut. So, all of this was because of pressure. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Her voice was filled with hurt and confusion. I didn't want you to feel like it was your fault. I wanted you to grow up with the hope that he might still come back. The truth was just too painful, Mi-suk said, her voice trembling. Su-jin was stunned. The image of her father, who had always been an absent, distant figure, began to seem more human. He wasn't just a man who abandoned her. He was someone struggling with his own demons. But that didn't erase the pain of his absence. Mum, I don't know how to deal with this. I'm so afraid I'll end up repeating the past, being just like him. And what does this mean for our future? She said, her voice laced with uncertainty. You're not him, Su-jin. You are a strong woman with a bright future ahead. The story doesn't have to repeat itself. You have the power to change what happens, Mi-suk said, looking her daughter in the eyes. You're not alone in this. A heavy silence followed. Su-jin felt a newfound understanding between them, a connection that had been missing. The pain was still there, but now it was joined by a sense of hope. And Hyun-woo? What do I tell him? Su-jin asked, the insecurity creeping back in. Tell him the truth. Honesty is the foundation of any relationship. Don't be afraid to show your vulnerabilities. He loves you and wants to be by your side no matter what, Mi-suk advised, holding Su-jin's hand. Su-jin nodded, feeling courage begin to grow within her. I'll talk to him. I need to be honest. With a lighter heart, she said goodbye to her mother, feeling a little more ready to face what was ahead. The shadow of the past didn't feel as overwhelming anymore. The battle wasn't over, but there was at least a light on the path. As she walked home, Su-jin realized that the journey to the truth was just beginning. The weight of the past was still there, but now there was a solid foundation on which to build her future. Courage was growing inside her, and with it, the hope that love could overcome any obstacle. With renewed determination, Su-jin decided it was time to open up to Hyun-woo. When she got home, her heart was pounding with a mix of anxiety and resolve. The truth, which once felt like an unbearable burden, was now a crucial part of her journey. Their relationship needed to be built on honesty, and she was ready to make that happen. That evening, after a busy day at work, Hyun-woo came home earlier than usual. He looked radiant, with a smile that lit up his face. His eyes sparkled with joy when he saw her, and Su-jin couldn't help but feel a warm comfort in her heart. "Hey, love," he exclaimed, wrapping her in a warm embrace. "How was your day?" "Hey, Hyun-woo, it was a hard day, actually," Su-jin replied, trying to mask the restlessness consuming her. He noticed the change in her expression and frowned. "Is everything okay? You seem worried." Su-jin hesitated for a moment, but the determination she felt earlier pushed her forward. I need to talk to you about something important." Hyun-woo's demeanor turned serious, and he placed his hands on her shoulders. "Of course. What's going on?" She pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. The cozy atmosphere of their living room felt heavier with the anticipation. "It's about my father. I never told you much about him because, well, I didn't know how," she began. Hyun-woo's eyes softened as he took her hand, offering silent support. "You can tell me anything. I'm here to listen." Su-jin took a deep breath, recalling her mother's words. "My father left us when I was very young. My mother never talked much about him, but today I found out things I never knew. Yunwoo's brow furrowed, worry etched on his face. What did you find out? She recounted her mother's story, about the husband who drifted away, the pressures that drove him to drink, and eventually his abandonment. Each word seemed to strip away an emotional weight she had been carrying for a long time. I just wanted to understand why he did it, why he left us. And now I'm so scared. What does this mean for me? For us, she said, her eyes glistening with tears. Yunwoo listened intently, his expression full of empathy and understanding. Sujin, what your father did was painful, and I can't imagine how much it hurt you, but that doesn't define who you are. You are not him. But what if I end up being like him? What if I leave you too? Sujin said, her voice cracking. He leaned forward, gently tilting her chin so she would look into his eyes. Look at me. You are not your father. You're an amazing, strong woman. I love you for who you are, not for who your father was. You have to believe that. The sincerity in his words touched Sujin's heart. The idea that she could be loved unconditionally, regardless of her past, began to tear down the walls she had built over the years. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, she whispered, the insecurity still lingering. I'm here for you. Together we can face anything, Hyunwoo said, wrapping her in a comforting embrace. What matters isn't what happened in the past, but what we're building together. Sujin felt a wave of relief wash over her. Resting her head on his shoulder, she closed her eyes and let the tears flow. The weight of the past still existed, but now she had someone by her side to face it. I want to try, Hyunwoo. I want to believe I can be different, that I can be happy, she declared, feeling a new sense of hope bloom inside her. And you will be. Just remember, you're not alone, he replied, softly stroking her hair. The conversation that once seemed so difficult now brought a new light to their relationship. Sujin knew there would still be challenges ahead, but she was ready to face them head-on. As the days passed, Sujin began to open up more about her feelings and insecurities. Yunwoo, ever patient, helped her see things from a new perspective. Together, they were building a solid foundation, a love that could weather the storms of the past. However, as the big day approached, an uneasy feeling began to creep into Sujin's thoughts. What would happen when the truth about her family's history came to light, especially in front of Hyunwoo's family? She couldn't help but wonder if everything they were building would be enough to withstand the truth. Determined to face whatever came their way, Sujin felt that the next step was crucial. The decision to confront the past, to embrace the pain and uncertainty, would be what truly defined her future. The days rushed by in a whirlwind of wedding preparations, but despite the joy, Sujin couldn't shake the anxiety that followed her. The memory of her father, who had left without explanation, loomed over her like a shadow, and as the day drew near, the weight of the truth became almost unbearable. Finally, the big day arrived. The sun shone brightly in the sky, and the reception hall was decorated with white and pink flowers, radiating an air of romance. Guests arrived, smiles and laughter filling the space, but Sujin felt as though she was floating in a world apart. As she stepped into the hall, her eyes locked onto Hyunwoo, who stood waiting at the altar. He looked dashing in a dark suit that accentuated his features. When their eyes met, a wave of love and determination surged within her. This was the man she wanted to spend the rest of her life with, but the weight of her past still consumed her. During the ceremony, Sujin was lost in her thoughts until the priest's words began to resonate in her mind. If anyone has anything to say, speak now or forever hold your peace. The phrase echoed in her mind like a call to action. For a moment, the world around her disappeared. She knew she needed to face the truth before it became an unbearable burden on their relationship. The ceremony continued, and the emotions in the room were palpable. When the priest asked if anyone objected to the marriage, a familiar voice cut through the air. Sujin! She turned, paralyzed. Her heart raced as she saw her mother, Minji, rushing down the aisle. Panic gripped her body, and a wave of worry washed over her. What was her mother doing here? Hyunwoo looked at her, confused. "What's going on?" he whispered, holding Soo-jin's hand. Soo-jin stood frozen. Minji looked breathless and distressed. "I need to talk to you now," Minji said, her voice full of emotion. Guests exchanged glances, the tension in the room thickening. Soo-jin hesitated, but in a moment of clarity, she decided it was time to face the past. "Okay, Mom," she said, feeling the weight of her decision. "I'll talk to you." The crowd parted, and Soo-jin walked toward her mother. Hyunwoo followed, concern etched into his face. They moved away from the altar to a quieter corner. "What are you doing here?" Soo-jin asked, her voice trembling. Minji took a deep breath, her eyes brimming with tears. "I couldn't let you get married without telling you the truth. You need to know about your father." Soo-jin felt a knot form in her stomach. "What do you mean by that?" "He's not who you think he is," Minji began, her voice shaking. "There were things I didn't tell you, things I thought were better left unsaid. But now, you need to know." Soo-jin sensed the urgency in her mother's words and urged her to continue. "What happened?" Minji hesitated, emotions spilling over. "Your father was battling his own demons. He wasn't just a man who abandoned his family. He was a man trapped in his own pain. The drinking wasn't just an escape, but a cry for help. But he left us. He left me," Soo-jin shouted, frustration erupting from her. "I know, my love, and I am so deeply sorry, but he loved you. He wanted to be there but couldn't handle his problems. That's what made him walk away," Minji explained, her voice thick with emotion. "He had his own traumas and didn't know how to face them." Soo-jin felt a mix of anger and compassion. How could someone she loved do something so hurtful? Yet at the same time she now understood that her father's pain was deeper than she had ever imagined. "So you knew all of this and never told me?" she said, her voice breaking. "I wanted to protect you. I wanted you to have a normal life, free from that pain. But now I see that you deserve to know the truth," Minji replied, tears streaming down her face. Hyunwoo, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward and took Soo-jin's hand. "We can face this together. No matter what you find out, I'm here for you." His words brought a small measure of comfort, but the storm of emotions still raged inside her. The reality of her father was unfolding, and the pain she had buried for so long was beginning to resurface. Soo-jin took a deep breath and looked at her mother. "Mom, what do I do with all of this? I want to get married, but I don't know if I can right now. You have to decide what's best for you. You're not your father. You have the chance to be different, to break the cycle," Minji said, her voice full of love. With a decision forming in her heart, Soo-jin looked at Hyunwoo. The love he had for her was unwavering, and she knew she had to move forward, no matter what the past held. "I want to marry you, Hyunwoo," she said, confidence slowly returning. "But I need to deal with this first. Let's face it together." Hyunwoo's eyes shone with understanding. "Of course, my love. We'll do this." And with that, Soo-jin felt a new determination take root within her. The journey wouldn't be easy, but now she knew she wasn't alone. After the disruption at the altar, Soo-jin knew she had to confront her past, head-on. The revelation about her father had left her in an emotional whirlwind, and the wedding, which should have been the pinnacle of her happiness, was now clouded by uncertainty. But one thing was clear: it was time to face the demons that haunted her. The following days were a blur. With Hyunwoo's support, Soo-jin sought to learn more about her father and the life he led before he left. In her mind, she started to imagine what life might have been like if he had stayed, and the gaps in the story consumed her. The need to know if her father had truly loved her, despite all his mistakes, became an obsession. Soo-jin decided to visit the bar where her father used to spend his time. The place had a worn look, reflecting the neglect and pain she had always associated with it. As she stepped inside, the smell of alcohol and cigarette smoke enveloped her, and a wave of nostalgia hit her. It was as if she were connecting with a piece of her history she had never wanted to explore. "What are you doing here?" asked an old man behind the counter. His eyes were tired, but held a glimmer of recognition. "You're Ji-hoon's daughter, aren't you?" Soo-jin hesitated. The man knew who her father was, and it brought a mix of relief and anxiety. "Yes, I am. First period. I'm trying to understand what happened to him." The man let out a deep sigh, as if preparing his heart to share something painful. Ji-hoon was a good man. He had his troubles, sure. The drinking took hold of him, but deep down he always cared about you. Those words stirred a whirlwind of emotions in Soo-jin. She wanted to believe her father loved her, but the reality of his departure still weighed heavily on her heart. "Do you remember the last time you saw him?" she asked, her voice shaking. "He was here, as usual, trying to drown his sorrows. In the end, he said goodbye to everyone and left." "I never knew where he went," the man said, shaking his head. "He didn't want you to see him like that. It was a fight he didn't know how to win." Soo-jin felt anger and sadness intertwine within her. "But he could have tried. He could have gotten help. I'm his daughter." "Sometimes people can't see a way out," the man said gently. "What I can tell you is that he talked about you. You were his greatest pride, even if he didn't know how to show it." The man's words softened Soo-jin's heart. For a moment, she could see her father as a lost man, battling his own demons, rather than just an absent father. She still loved him, despite everything. Soo-jin felt the need to do something to honor her father. She knew she had to forgive him, not just for his absence, but for his flaws as well. So she decided that before moving forward with the wedding, she needed to visit her old home, the place where she grew up, to find closure. The house was empty and covered in dust, like an old portrait no one looked at anymore. She stepped inside, feeling the sadness of the past wrap around her like a blanket. The walls were steeped in memories, laughter, and tears. Every corner seemed to tell a story she had never known. Amid those memories, Soo-jin found a dusty box in the attic. Inside, there were letters from her father, written in moments of despair and pain. The words were raw, and she felt as if she were reading his soul. "I'm so sorry for not being there," one letter read. "I'm sorry for not being the father you deserved. What I want most is for you to be happy, even if it means living without me." Tears streamed down Soo-jin's face as she read. In that moment, she realized her father had been a victim too, trapped in a cycle of pain he didn't know how to break. She wished he could be there, but now she understood the complexity of his choices. When she left the house, Soo-jin felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. She now had the courage to face the future, no longer defined by her father's absence, but by the strength she had found within herself. Returning to the apartment she shared with Hyun-woo, Soo-jin found him waiting with a worried expression. "Are you okay? What happened?" he asked, stepping closer. "I went to the old house and I read some letters from my father," she said, her voice shaking. "I finally understood how much he loved me, even if his actions said otherwise." Hyun-woo smiled, admiring her bravery. "That's a big step, Soo-jin. Are you ready to move forward?" "Yes, I am," she replied, more confident than ever. "I want to marry you. I'm ready to build a future, not just for me, but in honor of my father too." He pulled her into a tight embrace, and Soo-jin felt the warmth of his strength. Together, they would face whatever came their way, and now she knew that no matter what happened, she could find peace within herself. With the decision to move forward and marry Hyun-woo, Soo-jin felt a new energy pulse through her. It was as if every part of her life had fallen into place, and the pieces that once seemed scattered now formed a beautiful mosaic. The weight of the past began to lift, allowing her to breathe freely for the first time in a long while. But life rarely unfolds predictably. While Soo-jin and Hyun-woo were busy planning the wedding, an unexpected message arrived on Soo-jin's phone, a photo of her father, Ji-hoon, accompanied by a brief note. "Saw your father at the bar last night." It was from a childhood friend who had moved away but was visiting. Soo-jin's heart raced. The relief and joy she had felt, accepting her past, turned into a storm of emotions. Was he alive? What did this mean for her? Curiosity mixed with doubt, and a need for answers began to take over. "What is it?" Hyun-woo asked, noticing the sudden change in Soo-jin's expression. I got a message. My father. He might be alive." Soo-jin's voice faltered, and the reality of what this meant began to weigh on her again. "Do you want me to go with you?" Hyun-woo offered. concern etched in his voice. "It could be dangerous if you don't know what state he's in." "I don't know. I'm confused. I want to see him, but I'm scared. What if he doesn't care? What if he doesn't want to see me?" Sujin was consumed by insecurity, feeling old wounds resurface. "Look, no matter what happens, I'll be by your side. And if you decide to go, we'll go together. You don't have to face this alone," Hyunwoo said, holding her hand firmly. His determination brought a small smile to Sujin's face. "Yes, let's go together. That makes more sense." And so they decided to go back to the bar where Sujin's friend had seen her father. On the way, the silence was heavy but also comforting. They glanced at each other occasionally, and the warmth of Hyunwoo's hand in hers made her feel a little braver. As they approached the bar, the feelings of fear and anxiety began to build in her chest. Stepping inside, the familiar atmosphere made her heart pound. The lighting was dim, and soft music filled the air. She scanned the room, searching for any sign of her father. Hope and dread mixed, and every shadow seemed to take his shape. "Hey, you're back," said the man behind the counter. He smiled, but his expression turned serious when he sensed the tension. "What brings you here?" "I'm looking for my father, Ji-hoon. I heard he was seen here," Sujin replied, her voice slightly unsteady. The man sighed. "I saw him a few nights ago. He was a bit lost, but he seemed to be doing better. I'd say he was trying to stay sober. I don't know where he is now." Sujin's hope began to wane. Sober? The thought of her father trying to hold himself together filled her with a mix of anguish and hope. It was a struggle she knew all too well, but the need to find him outweighed her doubt. "Do you mind if we take a look around?" Hyunwoo asked, his voice calm. "Look, I can't let you go to the back, but I can show you where he used to sit. If he comes back, you might find him there," the man suggested. Sujin and Hyunwoo followed him to a dimly lit area with a few empty tables. A small space, with a view of the street, seemed to be the spot where Ji-hoon would sit. The tension hung heavy in the air as they waited. "What if he doesn't show up?" Sujin whispered, fighting back the tears threatening to spill. "What if he doesn't want to see me?" "If he doesn't, that doesn't change what you're doing for him. You're not responsible for his choices. You can only do what's right for you," Hyunwoo said, his calm tone easing the storm inside her just a little. Time dragged on, and Sujin began to question if it was even worth it. Just as she was about to give up, the bar door slowly opened. A figure stepped inside, and her heart stopped. It was Ji-hoon. He looked older and worn, with deep circles under his eyes and skin marked by time. The shirt he wore was wrinkled, and his expression was a mix of confusion and relief as he recognized Sujin. Her gaze reflected the pain he had caused, but also the hope for reconciliation. "Sujin?" His voice was low, almost a whisper. "Dad," she replied, her voice trembling. The world around them seemed to fade away, and in that moment the only thing that mattered was the reunion of father and daughter, each bearing their own scars but both longing for a path to healing. A heavy silence filled the room as Ji-hoon and Sujin stared at each other. It was a moment charged with tension, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The father she had searched for all these years was right in front of her, but the reality of their reunion was more complex than either of them could have imagined. "What are you doing here?" Ji-hoon asked, his voice hesitant. He seemed confused, but a shadow of worry crossed his face when he noticed Hyunwoo standing by Sujin's side. I wanted to talk to you," Sujin said, her voice shaky but determined. "I heard you were here. I thought I might find you." Ji-hoon hesitated, his eyes darting between his daughter and the young man beside her. "You shouldn't be here. I'm not the man you think I am. I'm not here to judge you," Sujin said, feeling a surge of emotions rise within her. "I'm here because I want to understand. I need to understand." "Understand what?" Ji-hoon asked, his defensive tone cutting through the air. "That I'm a failure? That I let you and your mother down?" Sujin took a deep breath, the words heavy in her throat. "You're not a failure. You're my father, and I just want to know what happened. Why did you disappear? Why weren't you there when I needed you most?" Childhood memories flooded Sujin's mind, each one more painful than the last. The nights she waited for her father, the heartbreak of watching him leave, and the desperation of not knowing if he was okay. Anger and pain mixed in her chest, but there was also a deep desire for reconciliation. Ji-hoon struggled, the words caught in his throat. I was lost. I didn't know how to handle life. The drinking consumed me, and by the time I realized it, it was too late. I didn't have the courage to come back and face you. Hyunwoo stood silently, taking in the emotional weight of the conversation. He squeezed Sujin's hand, offering silent support and strength. It was a delicate moment, and he wanted her to feel strong. You didn't have to do it alone, Sujin said, her voice now softer but still charged with emotion. I needed you. I still need you. What happened between us can't be undone, but we can try to find our way back. Ji-hoon looked down, clearly battling his own emotions. The guilt and pain were evident in his eyes, and Sujin knew he was searching for the right words. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not worthy of being your father, he muttered, his voice breaking. Forgiveness isn't about being worthy, Dad. It's about letting go of the past. I'm not the scared child who waited for you to come back. I'm a woman now, and I want to move forward. But to do that, I need you in my life. Even if you're in a different place, I still want you to be part of my story, Sujin said, feeling the sincerity in her words. Ji-hoon's eyes met his daughter's, and for the first time, he saw the woman she had become. The strength and determination radiating from her were a shock to him. The pain he had caused was still there, but hope was beginning to take root. I don't know if I can make it right, but if you're willing to give me a chance, I want to try. I want to be here, even if it's just a little, Ji-hoon finally said, his voice steadier. Tears streamed down Sujin's face. It was a mix of relief and sadness. She didn't know if she could fully trust him yet, but in that moment she felt that the first step was being taken. Then let's try, Dad. One day at a time, she replied, her voice soft but resolute. The tension began to fade, and for a brief moment, a glimmer of hope lit up the room. Hyunwoo, watching everything unfold, felt a deep respect for Sujin's courage and Ji-hoon's struggle. He knew their journey was just beginning, but this was a good start. Shall we get out of here? Hyunwoo suggested, breaking the tense atmosphere. We can find a quieter place to talk. Sujin nodded, and together they left the bar. Outside, the sun was shining, and to Sujin it represented a new chance. As they walked, Ji-hoon began to open up more about his life, his struggles, and his hopes. It was a step forward, and she was ready to take it with him. The story of forgiveness and reconciliation was just beginning, and although the road ahead was uncertain, Sujin was prepared to face it. The following days were filled with a mix of emotions and anxiety for both Sujin and Ji-hoon. Reconciliation wouldn't happen overnight. It was a complex process that required patience and understanding. Their initial conversations were hesitant, but they were both determined to understand what had happened in their lives. Sujin recalled how long she had waited for this moment. Every birthday without a phone call, every achievement she couldn't share with Ji-hoon, all of it echoed in her mind. Yet she was determined not to let the past define her. Dad, I've been thinking about something, Sujin said during a dinner they had decided to share. The table was filled with traditional Korean dishes, but there was a nervous energy between them. What is it? Ji-hoon asked, his voice cautious. What do you think about taking a trip? We could visit Grandma's house. I remember you always talking about your memories there. Ji-hoon hesitated. The idea of revisiting the past terrified him. Memories of his childhood were a tangled mix of love and pain, and going back to the place where he had grown up felt like an overwhelming challenge. But as he looked at Sujin's hopeful face, he realized this could be an opportunity to rediscover not only his own story, but also hers. I'd love to, but Ji-hoon began, his voice shaky. What if I can't handle it? What if I'm not the father you need me to be? You're being too hard on yourself, Sujin said, with a calmness that reflected their newfound understanding. What matters is that you're here now, and if you're not perfect, that's okay. We can learn together. Ji-hoon nodded slowly, feeling a bit more reassured. The idea of making this trip began to take root in his heart. It would be a step toward healing, both for him and for Su-jin. "Then let's plan it," Su-jin exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "We can do it over a weekend, so you'll have time to prepare." The days that followed were full of small exchanges. Ji-hoon began to open up more, sharing stories from his childhood that had been buried under layers of pain and regret. He talked about his grandmother's house, the smell of rice cooking, and afternoons spent helping in the garden. The memories that once felt heavy were now becoming a foundation for a new relationship. "I used to have a friend named Min-jun," Ji-hoon remembered, his eyes distant. "He always encouraged me to dream. He'd tell me I should be more than just the baker's son." Su-jin smiled as she listened. "And you are more than that, Dad. You're my father. You can be whatever you want to be." The day of the trip finally arrived. As they drove toward Grandma's house, a mix of excitement and nervousness filled the air. Ji-hoon tried to keep his anxiety at bay, while Su-jin watched the scenery go by, feeling closer to her father with each mile. When they arrived, the house still carried that familiar aroma of home-cooked food. Ji-hoon hesitated at the entrance, memories of his childhood bringing both joy and pain. But seeing Su-jin's face, his heart warmed. He remembered why he was there, to build new memories. "Let's go in, Dad," Su-jin said, taking his hand and gently pulling him forward. Inside the house, every corner brought back memories. Ji-hoon stood in silence, taking in the familiar objects that were still there. The old bookshelf, the sofa where Grandma used to tell stories, and the kitchen that always had a welcoming feel. Su-jin's eyes lit up with excitement. "What do you want to do first?" she asked, a sparkle in her eyes. "Let's go to the garden. That's where I spent many summers," Ji-hoon said, an involuntary smile forming on his face. In the garden, they found flowers that Ji-hoon had planted as a child. Memories began to flow, and he talked about how Grandma had taught him to care for the plants. The sunlight lit up Su-jin's face, and she felt like she was finally starting to understand her father. "I want you to teach me how to take care of the flowers, just like Grandma taught you," Su-jin said, looking into his eyes. Ji-hoon smiled, and for the first time in a long while, he felt hope. The bond they were forming was the key to unlocking doors that had been closed for so long. The past might have been painful, but together they were beginning to create a new future. The sun was setting behind the mountains, casting a golden glow over Grandma's garden. The scent of the flowers mixed with the gentle breeze, bringing a sense of peace and renewal. Ji-hoon and Su-jin sat on the old wooden bench, surrounded by memories of a past that now felt less heavy. After a day full of conversations and laughter, Ji-hoon realized he was opening up in a way he never had before. Each story about his childhood brought forth not just pain, but moments of happiness he had long forgotten. Su-jin listened intently, her eyes shining with empathy and understanding. "Dad, you never told me what Grandma was like. I'd love to hear more about her," Su-jin said, breaking the silence. Ji-hoon smiled as he thought of his grandmother. She was strong and wise. She always said that flowers are like people. They need care and attention to bloom. "And you remembered that when you taught me how to care for the garden," Su-jin replied thoughtfully. "I feel like I'm starting to understand not just you, but myself too." Ji-hoon's expression softened. The bond they were building was deeper than either of them could have imagined. He remembered how he felt being by his grandmother's side, and now here was his daughter, searching for a connection that once seemed lost. "I feel like I'm learning to be a better father. I never wanted to repeat the mistakes of the past," Ji-hoon confessed, his voice slightly trembling. "You don't have to be perfect, Dad. No one is. What matters is that you're here now. We can build this together," Su-jin said, taking his hand. The warmth of her hand made Ji-hoon feel lighter. He never imagined that visiting Grandma's house would bring so much reflection and change. In that space filled with history and love, he realized there was still room to redeem himself and become the father he always wanted to be. As night fell, they decided to make dinner together, just as Ji-hoon used to do with his grandmother. The kitchen was filled with laughter as Soo-jin and Ji-hoon tried to recreate Grandma's famous rice cake recipe. Between flour and laughter, the tension that once existed between them dissolved, giving way to a new dynamic. "I can do this," Soo-jin exclaimed, holding a slightly misshapen rice cake. Ji-hoon chuckled, feeling a wave of happiness wash over him. "Don't worry, the taste is what matters. And of course a little bit of love," he said, winking at her. As dinner cooked, they continued to share stories about their lives. Ji-hoon spoke about his childhood dreams and how he once wanted to become an artist. Soo-jin, in turn, shared her ambitions to be a photographer, capturing the beauty of the world around her. "You should follow your dreams, Soo-jin. Life is too short to be bound by what others expect of you," Ji-hoon said, his gaze sincere. Soo-jin smiled, feeling the strength of her father's support. "And you, Dad, what do you really want to do?" Ji-hoon hesitated for a moment. The question echoed in his mind, and he realized he had forgotten his own desires for so long. "I always wanted to paint. I never had the courage to really try." "Then why don't we start a project together? We could create something that blends both our visions," Soo-jin suggested excitedly. "I'd love that," Ji-hoon replied, feeling energized by the idea. He realized he wasn't just reconnecting with Soo-jin, but rediscovering himself as well. The dinner ended with lots of laughter and empty plates. As the night went on, their conversation turned to stories about Grandma and how she always believed in the importance of family. Ji-hoon recalled a saying she used to repeat, "The roots of a tree are just as important as its branches." He felt that now was the time to nurture those roots and strengthen what had once been fragile. As they looked at the stars through the window, Ji-hoon turned to Soo-jin, his eyes full of gratitude. "Thank you for helping me find myself again." Soo-jin smiled. "I'm grateful you're here. It's a new beginning for both of us." That night, the past became just a part of the story they were writing together. The future was full of possibilities, and Ji-hoon and Soo-jin were ready to face whatever came their way side by side. And so, as the moonlight bathed Grandma's house, father and daughter found not only their way back to each other, but also to themselves. The love and understanding that blossomed that day would be the foundation for a relationship that would grow stronger with each passing day, a new story ready to be written. Months passed, and spring brought new life to Grandma's garden. The flowers bloomed in vibrant colors, symbolizing rebirth and the promises of the future. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin had become inseparable, finding joy in the small moments of daily life. Afternoons were spent painting, laughing, and sharing stories, and the bond between father and daughter grew stronger with each day. One day, while organizing their artwork in a small studio they had set up in the backyard, Soo-jin turned to Ji-hoon with a sparkle in her eyes. "Dad, do you remember that project we wanted to do together? I was thinking we could set up an exhibition. A way to show our journey and everything we've learned," she suggested, her enthusiasm contagious. Ji-hoon smiled, admiring Soo-jin's passion. "That's a great idea. We could call it Roots and Branches, symbolizing how our relationship has grown and strengthened." The idea for the exhibit quickly took shape. They decided to include works that reflected their individual experiences, as well as their shared achievements as father and daughter. Soo-jin captured the beauty of nature through her photographs, while Ji-hoon brought his memories to life on canvases filled with color and emotion. Together, they wove a visual narrative that told the story of their lives. On the day of the exhibit, the studio was filled with friends, family, and neighbors. The room buzzed with laughter, lively conversations, and an electric energy. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin were nervous but excited. Seeing people admire their work filled them with pride. "Look, Dad, that lady is looking at the painting you did of Grandma," Soo-jin exclaimed, pointing to an older woman whose eyes sparkled as she recognized the childhood scene Ji-hoon had painted. Ji-hoon walked over to the woman. "Did you know my grandmother?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "Yes, she was an incredible woman. Your painting captures her essence perfectly," the woman replied, smiling warmly. The woman's words brought tears to Ji-hoon's eyes. He had never felt such a strong connection to his memories until that moment. In this exhibit, they were not only sharing their talents, but also honoring Grandma's life and the impact she had on them. As the evening progressed, the conversations deepened. Ji-hoon and Soo-jin listened to others' life stories, each one intertwining with their own experiences and creating a sense of community. They remembered the struggles, fears, and most importantly, the triumphs that everyone had faced. By the end of the night, as the guests began to leave, Ji-hoon and Soo-jin sat in the garden. The sky was dotted with stars, and the atmosphere was peaceful. "What did you think of the exhibit?" Ji-hoon asked, his eyes fixed on Soo-jin. "It was amazing, Dad. I feel like we showed not just our art, but our journey. And it's only the beginning," Soo-jin replied, her face illuminated by the soft moonlight. Ji-hoon nodded, gratitude filling his heart. "I never thought I could find so much joy again. What we have now is more than I ever dreamed of. And there's so much more ahead. Let's keep creating, learning, and most of all, living," Soo-jin said, her smile full of hope. That night, Ji-hoon made a promise to himself and to Soo-jin. He committed to continuing his pursuit of creativity, connection, and understanding. He knew that the roots of their family ran deep and that together they could weather any storm. As they walked away from the studio, Ji-hoon looked at the garden and saw the flowers swaying gently in the breeze. He smiled, knowing that, like those flowers, life had its seasons. And with each season came the opportunity to grow and bloom again. It was a new cycle, a new beginning, where life and art intertwined, and where the love between a father and daughter became a lasting testament to the power of reconciliation and hope. And so, under the vast, star-filled sky, Ji-hoon and Soo-jin took the first steps of a new journey, ready to face whatever the future held, bound by unbreakable ties of love and understanding. This story of overcoming, love, and reconciliation teaches us that even in life's storms, there is always room for renewal and hope. What did you think of this story? What lessons did you take from it? If you were touched by their relationship and want to explore more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Click the like button if you enjoyed this, and share this video with friends and family who might be inspired. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your voice matters to us. And to stay updated, keep watching. On the screen, you'll find a link to our next video, which will surely help you dive deeper into reflections on life and family relationships. Don't miss it. Just click and discover. Thank you for joining us on this journey. See you next time.